So, this is the first edition of the Khoodeelaar television channel, Baby Angel Geronimo editions, for quite a while, few weeks, I think. In which time, in which period that is, things have happened in the United Kingdom, so called, with congenital liar, the depraved Boris Johnson being replaced by the congenital liar, Liez Truss. And more importantly, in terms of the coverage of the brainwashing, Fleet Street, the passing of Brenda, also known as Queen Elizabeth II, and her replacement a few days later, during the weekend, I think, as monarch by her son, the eldest son, Brian, also known as Charles, who has been replaced by Charles, announcing the replacement, that is, of the title of Prince of Wales, given to Williams, Diana's son. I say Diana's son because it is clear that as the newly proclaimed monarch, Brian is going to have a very difficult time, especially when the revelation has been repeated about Diana predicting the exact way that she would be murdered. She predicted in handwritten notes that have been published now that she would be murdered in a car accident that would be staged in order for Brian to be allowed to marry again, which is clearly the marriage to Camilla. And it's Camilla who is widely reported or widely considered in the UK to be the real target of Diana's son Harry, who is particularly outraged by Camilla's behavior that actually caused his mother's death. That is according to the published accounts. I mean, the fact that Muhammad Al-Fayed has again ignited at least part of the Fleet Street headings that Diana was murdered has been made possible by the acceptance by the racists in Fleet Street of Michael Mansfield as a more credible source, because he is white and he is a, quote, licensed law trader. Those are two things, but the other thing is the revelation, according to Private Lie, the revelation of something that was known for 7 years or had been reported, although not prominently, but actually reported 7 years ago in 2015, that these 3 girls from Tower Hamlets, the 3 Bethnal Green school girls, were taken into the IS territory in Syria by a joint operation by British and Canadian spies. Now, all of this brings back to us the fact-based, truthful assertion and ownership of the assertion that we have been making exclusively, originally, consistently about the fact that the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, the local council, which is under a duty, what is called the safeguarding children's duty, and neglected that safeguarding children duty. We have asserted extensively, originally, exclusively, for years, that the fact that Tower Hamlets Council failed or chose not to act on safeguarding the children, Shamima Begum being the more widely known name of the three girls. We asserted, and we still assert, and of course we assert with stronger evidential background, now that the police treaters have now admitted that Shamima was taken by a Canadian and British spies to the Syrian so-called Islamic State territory. So it was an operation done by the British state, the Canadian state. So everything that these girls have been described as has now been exposed as being sham. We said that these were children, and they are children even now. So these children were owed safeguarding children duties by the local Tower Hamlets Council, which chose not to safeguard the duties, carry out the duties it owed to them, to these girls. And the choice takes the narrative straight to 2010, October 2010, which is when the elected mayor post was foisted on the people of Tower Hamlets, with the incumbents being evident in the person of Luther Rahman. On the 29th of October, just a week after the so-called election, on the Friday, the 29th of October 2010, I spoke to Lutfer Rahman at the steps of the London Brick Lane Mosque in Brick Lane. I spoke very briefly, but I spoke core truth. I told Lutfer Rahman that he must sit down with me as a matter of the extreme urgency, because by accepting or assuming the post of executive elected mayor, he had stepped into the most explosive tip of corruption and many other problems which he must deal with without any delay. Luther Rahman, as everyone who knows him about the way he speaks, he was typically dishonest, disingenuous, but also crafty in assuming that what he was saying and how he was saying it would in any way convince me that he was genuine in his response. He pretended to be reassuring me by saying, Aicha boimu, aicha boimu, shomoy. He did not contest the veracity, the truth, the force, the power of my demand that he sat down with me. Now, Luther Rahman on Tuesday, the 15th of February 2011, visited (164) Brick Lane, and he met a group of individuals under the cover of the Hiba Women's Project. And as any investigative photographer would tell you, a photograph cannot be taken just by flashing or pointing the camera at the subject. A lot of work is involved in the actual positioning of the photographer and the targeting and the aiming of the camera at the target. So instead of going in there and witnessing what exchange between Luther Rahman and these individuals that allegedly represented or came together for that event under the banner of Hiba Women's Project, I decided to stay outside of Brick Lane, of that building. And I stood not far from 170 Brick Lane. And I stood opposite the hired car, a metered car that Luther Rahman was using for the trip to visit Brick Lane on that occasion. So altogether, Luther Rahman was there for probably just under an hour. And as he came out of 164 Brick Lane, my camera angle was focused on him right there at the exit. As he stepped into Brick Lane, and it captured Luther Rahman, Aman Dalby, and the criminal Aziz Chowdhury, and his two co-criminals from the Spitalfields Small Business Association. So they are there in the actual video, the very short video that has been online since that day at YouTube that I posted. So I captured all three of the SSBA so-called trustees, as well as Luther Rahman and Aman Dalby. But instead of walking along with Luther Rahman to the car, the two other trustees, other than the criminal Aziz Chowdhury, decided to disappear. And Aziz Chowdhury, being the congenital sucker up, he decided to walk along with Luther Rahman and Aman Dalby. Now, Dalby, a shifty ethnicity-related careerist opportunist crook, felt very uneasy in my presence. So what he was doing was, as my camera, it was filming. It was not taking short pictures, but or stills. It was actually filming. The film will show or shows that Dalby was hiding his face away from the camera. And Aziz Chaudhry, the criminal, inept and idiotic, asked Lutfur Rahman to speak to me as if Lutfur Rahman needed to know who I was. I was the person filming them. Ordinarily, that would not be the subject of this kind of conversation. What is a film or photographer or filmmaker? It's nothing to do with what they were doing there. It is to do with the vision. But I had planned the actual images as evidence because I am a contextual, investigative, campaigning, legal, evidential, active photographer. And photography is only part of the crucial evidence that I create the frame and framework. So when they came very near to me, Aziz Chaudhry was repeatedly asking Lutfur Rahman in Siloti whether Lutfur Rahman had either known me or communicated to me. And Lutfur Rahman, being shifty as ever, wanted to shift away from my presence as fast as he could. So he very briefly dealt with Aziz Chaudhry. Instead of engaging in a long conversation with Aziz Chaudhry, Mat oise. He said it twice, at least more than once. And Aziz Chaudhry put on a banal and stupid grin as they approached the car. Aziz Chaudhry followed Lutfur Rahman, and Lutfur Rahman got into the car, and Aman Dalby, the crook, had already got into the car. It's all there in the film. Although it's a short film, all of this is there. And the way that Lutfur Rahman got into the car and Aziz Chaudhry was latching on to him, literally latching on to him, gives the story of Aziz Chaudhry sucking up all his life, making a career of being a sucker. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter whether Lutfur Rahman was completely condemned by me as a liar already. I mean, what I said to Lutfur Rahman months ago, only a week after his so-called election, outside the Brickland Mosque, clearly would have been without the reach of the imagination of this stupid Aziz Chaudhry. I told Lutfur Rahman that he was in grave danger of destroying the reputation of the community, putting the community's reputation at risk. That is what I said to him on Friday, the 29th of October 2010. And here was February, Tuesday, the 15th of February 2011. Aziz Chaudhry was wondering if Lutfur Rahman had made contacts with me, as if I was there to be making any contact with Lutfur Rahman. The last thing I needed was to make any contact with Lutfur Rahman. because Lutfur Rahman was a liability. He was an embarrassment to the community, and he was unfit. He was unfit then that was February 15th of February 2011. And this is now what, 2022? 11 years later, he remains even more unfit. And we shall be covering and updating on the unfitness of Lutfur Rahman and the damage that he has done. The damage he has done to the community individuals and damage he has done to the absolute, unique, world standard, unique work that I had been doing. And I knew when in January 2010, there was this so-called meeting held at the Micro Business Center featuring a few former Tower Hamlets Labour Party councillors who pretended to be talking about the unsuitability of having an elected mayor. They pretended because there was absolutely no evidence that they understood. They understood anything to do with the threat that having an elected mayor posed to the community. 11 years later, none of these individuals has got any idea, the slightest idea of what the community lost and what the community still faces in the future, as a coming near future, as a direct result of the corrupt post of elected mayor foisted on Tower Hamlets by the crooks and criminals and spies and operatives that wanted to undemocratize the community, which was already fragile in its democratic disintegration and fragmentation. One of the liars in Tower Hamlets that took part in the lying pretension stated from stages where they held small gatherings, claiming those gatherings to be about opposing a vote for yes vote for the referendum as to whether to have an elected mayor, foisted on Tower Hamlets or not. Was the overhyped, overrated, over-publicized, racist Peter Golds. Peter Golds has been created as a one-man crusade against Muslims, against Bangladeshis, and most certainly against ordinariness of democratic audit and accountability. That has been done by Ted Jury. Jury has been one of the two dishonest, ignorant, so-called journals, who between them have created a lot of materials against Lutfur Rahman. Their motivation is nothing to do with creating a democratic atmosphere in Tower Hamlets. Their motivation is to undo what they prejudicially, racistly saw as any section of the population, the majority of which was Muslim, getting any kind of apparent representation. So instead of talking about the lack of democracy, lack of democratic accountability, Ted Jury and his I'm going to go off camera for a minute. Ted Jury and the creep, racist creep, Mark Baines, who reportedly has died recently, continued to pester Luthera's kind of ears under various pretexts and excuses. But they did not catch any of the wrongdoings, the abuses, the thefts, and the corruption that Lutheraman was engaged in, perpetrating throughout the period. Even the evidence that came to the fore during the hearing by the election commissioner, Richard Morey, during the months up to the 23rd of April 2015, even that evidence, or the main evidence, that Ted Jury and Mark Baines kind of retailed during the proceedings, had not been anticipated by these two morons. That shows that Ted Jury, far from having any stature as a professional journalist, was an idiot. He engaged in titillation of his own variety, and as did Mark Baines. Stupid to the last. Baines had the indignity of witnessing Lutheraman's could return to the post of mayor before he, Mark Baines, apparently died. Now we have got quite a lot of evidence about Mark Baines' stupidity, as we have about Ted Jury's racist stupidity and idiocy. But Ted Jury is also personally compromised because he wanted a kind of relationship with somebody, and that relationship apparently was linked with Ted Jury being used as an Indian, that is Hindutva agenda stooge, which meant that, for example, during the Olympics 2012, Jury went out of his way to give credit to elements that would deny due recognition to any Muslim campaigner. For example, the references to the Madhya Pradesh gas explosion in an American-owned company. And the campaigning kind of credentials and credits were given by Ted Jory to non-Muslims. Whereas the truth is that the non-Muslims' dominance in the so-called campaigns was a direct reason for the victims, which were mainly Muslims, being denied justice. And that remains the case now, 10 years on from the Olympics. So Ted Jory is an anti-Muslim stooge. And the relationship that he has made with so-called Bengalis from Bangladesh are actually contaminated by his stooging role and stooging stupidity. Ted Jory was idiotically kind of parasiting himself around the then incumbent Bethnal Green and Bow Member of Parliament George Galloway through his, that is Galloway's, drinking aids. Now Galloway had a cabal of about 3 or 4, quote, advisors who were absolute racist morons. Because if they were not racist morons, Galloway would have had a different political course. But now he is lost. He's sunk now. He's sunk after being literally unsuccessful in getting the approval of the racist, nasty Nigel Farage. It was us, the Khoodeelaar campaign, that salvaged the disgraced George Galloway after he exposed himself through Peter Brezengit, who was operating the Devil's program called the Big Brother House on Channel 4. Galloway would have been kicked out of the constituency as Member of Parliament in January 2006 had it not been for the Khoodeelaar campaign. That is the power of ethics and morality. We easily disposed of the threat that Galloway faced because we represent uniquely the ethics and morality against the crooks and criminals in Tower Hamlets. So we operated an exclusive program whereby we sent Tony Blair and his locally based crooks that wanted Galloway to be discredited. We sent them packing. Now, Galloway has never acknowledged this, let alone the other, uniquely savoring role that we played in his keeping the post as Member of Parliament for another few years. But that is because Galloway is an ungrateful, ignorant racist whose career has been built on the pretension that he was uniquely uniquely dedicated to defending not only the Palestinians but the rest of the world's Muslims. Nothing could be further from the truth because Galloway came apart and came completely, became unstuck when the Peterborough by-election was looming and Galloway wanted to stage a stunt as Nigel Nasty Farage's candidate at Peterborough. And Nigel Nasty Farage must have told the idiot George Galloway to get lost, which proved what we had advised Galloway to do. We had said that he should limit his extravagant claims about things. But Galloway could not resist the temptation of staging a stunt. We shall come back to updating on Galloway in due course, of course. Now back to Shamima Begum and the role of the Tower Hamlets Councils safeguarding children duties. And I started by referring to October 2010. Why? Because October 2010 would have been about the actual time around when Shamima Begum and her friends were beginning to be groomed by the spies, because they would have been 9 or 10 years of age. Because by the time they were guided by the Canadian and British spies, or Canadian and British spying operation into Syria and the so-called IS territory, they were about 15. So it would have been 5 years since Luther Rahman became the elected executive mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets and at the expense of these girls as well. Now, had Luther Rahman been a properly educated, conscious, democratically in place holder of a post, he would have made sure that these girls were given due protection by the local council which owed them the duty. But of course, Luther Rahman was not educated and he was ignorant. He was a stooge and he remains a stooge. He's a worse stooge now than he was before. Because when the Daily Mail, the scum and others admitted in the last fortnight that Shamima Begum was taken to the IS by Canadian spy, because the Canadian spy was the one who was named as he was kind of identified in Turkey. Not the British spy, but the Canadian one was the one that the Turks identified. There was no assumption. There was no assumption on the part of any of the British media that these children could be innocent. The assumption was that these children were guilty as hell. And for 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, these children have been, or their images have been tarnished by known intentional vilification, intentional anti-Muslim vilification by the British media, which has colluded with the British state and the Canadian state in perpetrating the myth that these children were some kind of radical terrorists. They were nothing. These children would have been prevented also from that fate if the Towners Council, as the local so-called education authority, had not conspired in 1994-95 to convert the then single-sex Dainford School into the mixed-sex school that it became. Because by converting the school into a mixed-sex school, a lot of moral restraint and discipline was thrown away. And a lot of things were done that would not have been done in a single-sex boys' school, which the Dainford School was. I was sabotaged by a combined operation in 94-95 by the Towners Council as the local education authority and other criminals who lied and manufactured various signatures to the petition that was going around. I was collecting signatures. I collected about 1,800 signatures from parents, and the criminals appeared to have collected just over a dozen or so more, or 100 more signatures, thus giving Towners Council the go-ahead to convert the Dainford School into the mixed-sex school that it became. Of course, these children were not even born in 1994-95, so I would have been able to prevent their getting trapped as children, as they were born and grew into secondary school age children, if that school had been preserved as a boys' school. And these girls would have gone either to the Mulberry School or another, the Central Foundation School for girls. And again, in the community in Tower Hamlets, especially the Bangladeshi community, because these girls, all of these girls, the so-called Bethnal Green girls, school girls, are Bangladeshis. The parents of these children, the guardians of these children, were deprived of the protection and support that they would have been able to get if I was supported by the crooks that are controlled by the various corrupt elements in Bangladesh and corrupt elements operating within the community in Tower Hamlets, including the controllers of Lutfur Rahman. So the Khoodeelaar campaign became the latest addition at that time in 2003 to the movement defending the community in Tower Hamlets. Now, the movement defending the community in Tower Hamlets is the umbrella organization that has existed since 13th of June 1963. Now, I created this, and the movement defending the community in the East End of London since the 13th of June 1963 has had literally thousands of projects, thousands and thousands of projects, and thousands of activities and communications and actions, which together add up to not one, because they're all original actions that I devised, and original prophetic, precise prophetic pronouncements that I have made. All of those prophetic pronouncements have been very clearly vindicated over the decades. So these criminals who pretend to be members of various groups, associations, etc., in Tower Hamlets are really out of the depths. They have no idea about education. They have no idea about schooling. They have no idea about the difference between schooling and education, etc., etc. So these children who are being sent to schools and institutions in Tower Hamlets are being sent to be abused, exploited by vultures at various stages. What happened to these girls, the Bethlehem school girls, was uniquely predicted by me. And it was one of the literally hundreds of predictions that were undermined by the liars in the community generally, and especially denied by the criminals who operate the so-called ethnicity-linked media. So these criminals and liars are neither here nor there. That is to say, they don't exist. But the children that are being exploited and exposed to these various operatives, their lives are destroyed, which they shouldn't have been. Even after the Daily Mail and the Scum and others, let's check what the Daily Mail recently has said about all right, I just want to read this before I go there. This is one of the sections of the poem Bidruhi by Qazi Nazrul Islam, the rebel. I have recited this ever since I first read it as a child. And I don't think that the West Bengal based kind of video carrying the recitation of a man who's supposed to have done the best recitation comes anywhere near any of my readings. But this is the one that I'm doing as this is the one that I'm doing currently as a test. Let's see if we can find this one. If we don't find that, then I'll not read this one. I'll not read that one because I'm not starting from the start. This script is not there. So I'll read the rebel another time. So what is happening? Let's check on the Shamima Begum item. This is historic because Shamima Begum, on the revelation, see this is the piece by somebody called, it's a very strange name, Azadi Muaveni, in the Stupid Guardian. Now the headline is Opinion, Islamic State. Shamima Begum is a story of trafficking, betrayal, and now it seems a state cover-up. What a stupid headline in the stupid, racist, corrupt, criminal, colluding Guardian. It says, allegations that her smuggler was a spy cast an entirely new light on the Home Office's decision to strip Begum of her citizenship. And it says, the parents of the Bethnal Green girls, as we used to call them before, two were killed, leaving only Shamima Begum as the media's jihadi bridezilla, knew from the start that something was off. After the girls ran away from their homes in East London in February 2015 and turned up in Syria with the Islamic State, the authorities dissembled at every turn. The school, the police, the security forces who had been monitoring the girls' communications, IS recruiters, every institution responsible with their protection put forward tales to explain how three working class girls aged just 15 and 16 had made their way out of Britain and navigated their way across multiple national borders to the most dangerous war zone on the planet. Now, the Guardian typically is corruptly collusive with the local council, town council. So it mentions the school, the police, and the security forces, but doesn't mention the council. But even the fact that it mentions the school doesn't go anywhere near acknowledging the fact that this was not a school called to be called Bethnal Green School. It was the Dainford School. And the whole headline is then retailed in the Guardian piece. Azadeh Muaveni. I've never come across this name, but obviously it's a she's described as the author of Guest House for Young Widows among the women of ISIS and associate professor of journalism at New York University. No wonder. Azadeh is an idiot. And so is the rest of the Guardian crew. But the point is that it was at the beginning of this month, September the 2nd, when this piece appeared. And it was about that time that the others in Fleet Street ran similar stories. Well, it's the BBC had a piece on the 31st of August 2022 reading, "Spy for Canada smuggled schoolgirls to Syria." As open, as brazen as that. So when we said that the so-called solicitor that was apparently acting in the name of Shamima Begum, Akunji, was himself an idiot or a stooge, we got that right as well. Because everything that has been now admitted, we had exclusively, originally, accurately asserted long ago. Tamsim or Tasnim Akunji. This is not a Bangladeshi name. This boy appears to be from a different kind of background, Muslim name, but not from Bangladesh. But Akunji is an idiot and a self-server, and in no time will Akunji turn out to become another Sadiq Khan. Anyway, all of them have been exposed as liars, and we say that Shamima Begum is owed full apology and her citizenship by birth must be immediately restored. And Priti Patel, the nasty one, should be prosecuted, as should the Supreme Court. Judges be prosecuted for racism because they gave the rubber stamp to Priti Patel and her stupid, corrupt gulami persistence that the Shamima Begum citizenship should be kept away from her. Now, this gulami takes us all the way to Pakistan, where Imran Khan staged the second fundraising telethon on Sunday, the 11th of September 2022. And Imran Khan staged the telethon, I think, as successfully as he did the first one about a week or so ago. This is staggering amount of money, absolutely unbelievable amount of money being raised in telethon, lasting less than, I think, 3 hours. I can check, but that is the maximum, I think, length or duration of this telethon. I mean, mainly Pakistan is living in North America, were pledging sums, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, as I said before, Imran Khan has got his facts, many of his facts wrong, and we shall come to those in due course. Right now, what Imran Khan is doing, and I said that with the condition that it is possible, there's some unforeseeable circumstantial factors may arise in the future. But so far, none has suggested itself. So as I say, Imran Khan has got some of his facts wrong. And these are very serious errors of fact. Now I make a distinction. In the full context of what Imran Khan is doing, his factual errors cannot be attributed to him as being intentional errors. I think these are errors because of his lack of proper education. Because although he went to Oxford College, that did not make him an educated person. The education comes completely from different sources. Imran Khan wasn't there in the 1960s when I confronted Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and defeated him at the confrontation that took place in the Institute of Engineers in Dhaka, in then East Pakistan. I confronted Zulfikar Ali Bhutto without any plan. And I did that strictly as a fact checker. Because my quest remains and has always been to get to the truth of the matter. That is the most important purpose in my work. Get to the truth. So when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto appeared at the Institute of Engineers stage, and he delivered what I recall, remember that was in the 1960s, a few minutes, it wasn't even an hour-long thing. When he delivered these few minutes, I think that he did that on the basis of his very stupid assumption that the gathering, which was mainly young men from East Pakistan, these are what could be called the elite from the University of Dhaka and other places across the capital. He assumed that these would be no match to him. Now, I was not part of a cabal or a clan or any tribe or a group. I was as independent then as I have been since. My only allegiance is to the cause of the looking for the truth and seeking the truth. My name is Haque, and my full name is Zahir al-Haque, one who uncovers the truth, publishes the truth, makes the truth known, Zahir al-Haque. This Zahir al-Haque has been colloquialized into my native Siloti as Zohirul Haq. Zohirul Haq, but actually to my nearest, my mother, my grandmother's, Zohirul Haq, which is far away from the Muhammad Haq that I'm known as and have been known as since the 1970s. The SWP wonkers, as typified by Paul Foot, they dropped my middle name and clung on to the first and the last. So I became Muhammad Haq, not Muhammad Zahirul Haq. So when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was kicked out of the cabinet by the dictator Ayub Khan, who came from Haripur in the Punjab, where Imran Khan has had one of his biggest rallies or jalsas in the recent days. Ayub Khan kicked Zulfikar Ali Bhutto out of jealousy or out of a sense of insecurity, because Zulfikar Ali was kind of restless for power, restless for attention. So what happened when he launched his what later became the People's Party, the bid for the new party in order to contest Ayub Khan's power base? Zulfikar Ali Bhutto thought that he would easily get the support of at least a working number of elite East Pakistanis, so that they could then spread the message on his behalf, the myth of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, the glamour boy of politics. And they would conquer the resurgent young East Pakistanis as belonging to him. And that would counter the threat from the numerically popular Awami League fronted by Sheikh Mujib. So that was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's calculation. Now, I created Bangladesh in that context, didn't I? Because if I hadn't upset Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, he would probably have his kind of numbers of elite East Pakistani leaders who would then successfully stall the Awami League's march. And if that happened, then there would be no East Pakistan, there would be no Bangladesh, because there would be no conflict. Mujib would not be demographically, politically as effective a rival as he turned out to be in the end, at the end of the December 1970 election. So it was a very annoyed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto that wanted to punish the East Pakistanis, which then led to the series, the cycle of events that led to the crackdown by the military and everything else that happened in 1971. So I am to blame for Bangladesh. I created Bangladesh by upsetting Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. It wasn't an intentional consequence, but that is what happened. Because when he gave his few minutes of spiel, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto gave the spiel in a way that he never imagined would be taken apart by anyone present at the gathering. He thought that he was unlike the character that Puneet Rajkumar played in the Zinda Dili, where he went into an Indian restaurant on his return to Bombay and wanted to eat meals on credit. And he was caught in an altercation with the owner of the restaurant. One of his senior staff mocked Puneet Rajkumar character as Ada Angres, half English, because Punit Rajkumar was speaking English as he was trying to negotiate a deal with the restaurant so that he would be allowed to eat meals on credit for a month, at the end of which he would pay 50,000 rupees to the restaurant. 50,000 rupees. Unlike the Punit Rajkumar Ada Angres, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was a complete, fully dressed Angres as he appeared on the stage at the Institute of Engineers. And as a fully macaulayed Angres, he thought that these East Pakistanis were not even a quarter Angres, as he was a full Angres. So he delivered a stupid speech, completely callous, ignorant, false, contradictory. Now, he had, of course, not any idea about me, let alone the record that I had held up to that time, from at least the moment in the 1950s when I told my school teacher at that time that I would become the president of Pakistan. When I said that to my teacher, I said that confidently. And I said that based on the actual combat, intellectual combat that I appeared to relish. So I was skilled in getting Bhutto on his weakest points, weakest links. By the time he appeared at the Institute of Engineers, he was absolutely not prepared for me. So he gave the spiel, and I started, and I had no idea. I absolutely had no idea, let alone any intention, let alone any plan, that it would end as it did end. I asked him, as I do, my style is to ask my target to explain the facts, the evidence. So I said to Bhutto, come on, you said this, you said that. They don't match. Whatever it was. Remember, it was in the 1960s. I'm not reading the script. I am only going by the memory, the biggest, the most sustained memory of the main exchange, which was that I challenged him factually on each of the constructions and each of the assertions and each of the assumptions. Now, looking at Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, anyone who observed Bhutto's face after he was hit by me would have known that Bhutto had not been there ready for my question. Because the very first thing that I noticed in Bhutto's reaction, it was not a response, it was a reaction, was that he was very unpleased, not pleased with me whatsoever. He looked uneasy, and he looked, obviously I wasn't filming, so I can't produce the actual photography or photographic evidence of what he did. He looked for kind of way out, literally. So instead of answering my question, he stood by what he had said. So I asked another question. And he did the same thing. And it went on until I asked him 9 questions in a row. Now, Bhutto cannot have come across anyone in his entire political life until he met me who had done that to him. I don't think he met anyone since that event either. So when I asked him the 9th question, Bhutto's face, Bhutto was, of course, already looking red. And it became redder and redder and redder. And it became so red that from where I was sitting, I thought he was weeping. He could have been weeping in frustration. He could have been weeping in kind of defeat. He could have been weeping in rage. But Bhutto was not in control of his own body. The body language gave away as much as his intellect had given away to me. So Bhutto did what a military person, he did an about turn. I think he turned right from where he was standing. And he stormed off the stage. Not a word to the audience, and nobody else came forward to say anything to the audience. Isn't it amazing that I'm talking about this? I've been talking about this now for a few years, but I've been talking about this in the knowledge that none of the so-called leaders of the Bangladesh Liberation War, or their leaders, or the writers, or whatever, seem to have noticed what I did to Bhutto. There is no, to my knowledge at this stage anyway, there is no reference to this event. Yet it was the creation of Bangladesh. Of course, there was a plan with Agartala conspiracy and all the other things, effort already for Bangladesh, but that was a completely theoretical plan, because that theoretical plan would never have materialized in the way quite had Bhutto not been a player. And the fact that Bhutto was so determined to defeat Sheikh Mujib during the talks that were held in Dhaka immediately after the election of December 1970. I believe, and I believed at the time that I was hearing the reports of the meetings, that Bhutto was trying to defeat. Bhutto must have kind of assumed in his mind that Mujib was me, that by defeating Mujib, he was having a go at me for destroying him. So by hook or crook, by any means necessary, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was determined to defeat Muhammad Haque. He didn't know I was Muhammad Haque or whatever, because I was not part of the party political machinations. All this time I was looking after my siblings and my mother, while also trying to be in Dhaka. So, I'm going to go off the camera for another time. So all the parameters of debate, all the parameters of philosophical exchanges and discourse came into the fore or came to the fore in the exchange that Bhutto faced with me. All his skills at the Oxford University while he tried to become the president of the union, everything else, and his various other periods in various other forums. So he became determined during the various talks in Dhaka with Shah Mujib that he was not going to let Mujib win. That, I think, was the impasse that Bhutto created. Because having lost the election numerically, Bhutto was lost without any way to defeat me. Because his target was an East Pakistani. And he wanted to defeat the East Pakistani. But how could he defeat me? He could only defeat Sheikh Mujib as a replacement of me. So I had preceded Sheikh Mujib by what, 4 years, whatever. Because whenever Ayub Khan sacked him is when this should be timed at. So I had led the confrontation against Zulfikar Bhutto successfully 3-4 years before he came back and beat Mujib with the military crackdown. That's how I created Bangladesh completely without any. It's like the immaculate kind of unintended creation of Bangladesh. A completely different level of Bangladesh. Nothing to do with Bengali nationalism or anything to do with that. It was a purely intellectual exercise, moral exercise that was born out of the fact that Bhutto thought that he was specially entitled because he came from the family of he came from a privileged, wealthy family, etc., etc. Well, I am the fourth generation descendant of the Bed Shah. Now, the Bed Shah could have had more wealth than Bhutto in Larkana had ever. Bed Shah gave it all away. My great grandfather was 100 times wealthier than Bhutto. But that's another story. And my grandmother, Tayyibun Nasa, told me that I was like my great grandfather. And I always believed her. And what my grandmother, Tayyibun Nasa, said impressed on me something very deep and very fundamental and very permanent. It has always been with me. So whenever I faced anyone, this is more than 50 years later, 55 years, I think, since I confronted Bhutto and beat him. So those who have pretended to have written the authoritative account of Bangladesh obviously have been in fool's paradise. They have missed the main war that I actually fought against Bhutto and beat him. So, back to August 1947, which is just under 20, around maybe 20 years before I confronted Bhutto. When the referendum took place about the future of Silot, the question was incomplete, incorrectly put. The result is now evident because Sylhet should have included, the Sylhet of today should have included the parts that have been left to remain in India of today. And the other thing which Narendra Modi has done and Amit Shah have done is the registration of the citizenship and the origins. How dare these criminals condemn people to be from somewhere else when they are in their very original places? What they are saying is that people across India who are Muslim are all somehow lacking in patriality, natural patriality, by which they mean that these people have come from somewhere else. Where have they come from? They're not from somewhere else. And yet this whole survey that has been conducted across the Northeast, and of course in Kashmir and other places, by Modi and Shah, is a survey based on that stupidity. For 700 years in the subcontinent, Muslims have been the rulers. 700 years. Well, there had been rulers before, but for 700 years, the main rulers in the subcontinent had been Muslims. And they had not been ruling by force. They had not been ruling by faith. They had not been ruling by imposing their faith on other people. As Imran Khan has said in one of his speeches, well, he has said recently, but he's said it recently not at the beginning of his speeches, but he said that people in Malaysia and in Indonesia prepared to embrace Islam after looking at the character, the strength of character, the honesty, and the integrity of the Muslims that had come to their shores. Imran Khan's theme is that Muslims, well, he's talking about Pakistan immediately, but that is not what he's talking about. He's talking about Muslims, not from just Pakistan, but from India, from Bangladesh, from other parts of the world as well. He's saying that when Pakistanis go to the world, then the strength of their character, their integrity, their honesty would shine so powerfully that people of the countries, the lands that they would visit, would be awed by the quality of their character. Now, when he says Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah, what Imran Khan is doing is going back to not 1757 only. He's going all the way back to the state of Medina. And quite who has been behind Imran Khan's manifesto that has become founded on what the Prophet said in the state of Medina. Who is behind this is not clear, because everything else about Imran Khan points to no way that he would be coming up with these statements now. His career as a cricketer, his career as a notorious playboy, while around the time when he met and married Jemima Khan. So Imran Khan did not grow up in the way that he is now asking the Naujwans of Pakistan to grow up and to form their characters. Imran Khan is saying that what Pakistan ka matlab kya? La ilaha illallah. He is saying that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was praised as the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, was the only free leader in an enslaved India, that is the subcontinent, enslaved to the British, enslaved by the British. And his reference to the title Ambassador of Hindu-Muslim Unity also raises questions as to who has been doing the research. Because I'm the only one who has been waiting for all of these to be brought out into the open. Sarojini Naidu, a Bengali woman of high achievement politically and career-wise, and of high intellectual abilities, is the one who gave the title to Jinnah, Ambassador of Hindu-Muslim Unity. And she is the one who wrote a definitive, authentic political, social biography of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And she is someone whose contribution, published or dated in 1917, about Jinnah is unrivaled by anybody else. The Naidu is not comparable with anyone in Bangladesh, most certainly not comparable with the Abdul Kuffar Chowdhury. Because Abdul Kuffar Chowdhury is the source of a completely stupid, unfounded allegation against Jinnah. Because the allegation against Jinnah is that he is the one, Muhammad Ali Jinnah that is, who led the campaign for and agitated for the separate state of Pakistan. That's not what happened. Pakistan was created when the Brahmins, led by Nehru, were doing what the Modi has been doing now, the Hindutva exclusivity. And that became quite clear to Jinnah. who correctly saw that if the British were allowed to leave the subcontinent without this relationship of power or the sharing of power among Hindus and Muslims being resolved, then Muslims would be the ones who would lose. So, from the ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was forced to become the leader of a campaign for an independent homeland for Muslims of the subcontinent. Because the Hindu-Muslim unity was something that he valued seriously, but something that was derided by and disowned by the Brahmins and the Hindutva forebearers, if you like. So Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry and others in East Pakistan accused Jinnah of creating Pakistan. Whereas the truth is that the Brahmins forced Muslims to have a separate homeland for their sheer physical survival. And everything that has been going on during the Narendra Modi fronted period reinforces that fear as being absolutely valid. But the latest such evidence is, of course, what Modi has done in Kashmir to the Kashmiri Muslims. They're taking away their citizenship. And same thing is happening in Assam and other parts of the northeast of India. Had there been no Pakistan, yes, there would have been no Bangladesh, would there? Which is the point that the speaker at a seminar of lawyers pointed out. But Imran Khan, because he lacks education, didn't react to that point. But that's the point. Because that speaker actually said that I'm not going to elaborate on this at this meeting or on this occasion. But the real Pakistan was East Pakistan. He said that Sindhis didn't want Pakistan, the Punjabis didn't want Pakistan. So the real Pakistan is where the East Pakistan is. So I'm acknowledging that Imran Khan may be innocent in terms of mental intention to lie. But whatever it is, he's leaving the main thing out so far. Because it is the main Pakistan is East Pakistan. And it's nothing to do with what Abdul Kuffar Chaudhry blames Muhammad Ali Jinnah for. Because it was the East Bengalis in 1905 that were the harbingers, the leaders of what became Pakistan and what became later Bangladesh. And it was that division of Bengal that prompted Tagore to vow that it would be the division of Bengal would be over his dead body. Irony, isn't it? That Mamata Banerjee, a Brahmin woman in West Bengal, has been the defender. Okay, it's not the defender to the full, but defender of the Muslims of West Bengal, Muslims of Assam, and in fact, by extension, Muslims of the rest of the Republic of India. Not Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh, Now, Sheikh Hasina resides in a fantasy land. She thinks that the Hindutva regime of India, the BJP, and the Hindutva forces, not the forces of West Bengal, the mixed forces of West Bengal, would save her and her cabal. She could not be more wrong. And because of the idiocy on the part of the so-called Bangladeshi nationalists who have been pointing out various things that are various wrong things that Sheikh Hasina has done, they have failed to nail her. Because all of them have been lying about the purpose of Bangladesh, which is Pakistan ka matlab kya. Because it was the purpose of survival of Muslims physically that drove the movement for Pakistan. And that driver was from East Pakistan. And one of the men at the wheel, of course, was Abdul Hamid Khan Bashani. Another man was Sher Bangla Fazlul Haq. So Imran Khan is leading a revolution in Pakistan about the purpose of Pakistan being the La ilaha illallah. But he's got another thing wrong, which is the massacres and genocides of the East Pakistanis in 1971. Even when acknowledging, because he's coming very slowly to the various parts of the admissions of the errors and the mistakes and the injustices. He says that the East Pakistanis were badly treated, that the East Pakistan broke away from Pakistan because of injustice. As that man at the seminar of lawyers pointed out, it was not East Pakistan that broke away. It was West Pakistan that disintegrated the Pakistan of 1947. So Imran Khan has got a lot of confusion about all of that. And unless he gets that absolutely right, the revolution that he is now talking about, Pakistan ka matlab kya, la ilaha illallah, the revolution will be shattered. It will not be realized. Because one of the reasons why he might be hiding even the amount of information and knowledge that he now has about 1971 might be his awareness that among the majority of the present day West Pakistani electors and voters, there is ignorant, dark misconception about the people of East Pakistan. So we shall be talking about all of those in due course, and hopefully we shall be broadcasting more frequently from Tuesday onwards. This is Monday, so Tuesday is tomorrow. So hopefully we shall be doing broadcasts more regularly from Tuesday, which is tomorrow, which is the 13th of September 2022. So let's see. I think this will be the time when we can come to an incomplete program, but